Smash is such a fun game, right?
Wrong! Smash is not a fun game! Take it from me, Dr. Fun. I main Ganondorf, and that's my entire personality!
For as long as I can remember, ever since playing Melee on the GameCube when I still mistook the controller for a teething ring, to the Wii, to the Wii U, all the way up until the Switch where I could fit the whole controller in my mouth, I've owned Smash Brothers for all of them, and I've always mained Ganondorf. Is this a brutal form of masochism? Potentially, but there's just something about Ganondorf that pulls me towards him. It might be his overwhelming power, his sick design, or relatability, as we're both large, lumbering laughingstocks. More so than anything else, Ganondorf in Smash Brothers is known as a complete joke of a character, a far cry from the Demon King of his home series. Ganondorf is consistently one of, if not the worst character in the game, with certain iterations in the running for the worst Smash character overall. Regardless of being terrible, he still has one of the largest cult followings of any character for that reason. He's garbage, he stinks, he couldn't take a stock off against an unplugged controller. But that just means when he does score a win, it's all the more fun. As I've matured and gotten sick of losing, I've branched out to other characters like the equally underwhelming Ridley and K. Rool, the so-so Mewtwo, and the God Emperor Pac-Man. But no matter what, I always keep Ganondorf on the docket because he's the best. Am I gonna win? No! Am I gonna piss somebody off in the process of trying? You bet! So today I wanted to go through all the way from the character's inception in Melee to his final update in Ultimate to go over what exactly makes Ganondorf so bad, and why that makes him the best character in the game. Starting with the first game he appeared in, Melee, Ganondorf's road into Smash was an extremely strange one. As you most likely know, Melee was held together by a thin layer of saliva that director Masahiro Sakurai applied at the last possible second to keep the game from leaking out of TVs. Melee's development was insanely rushed, and so much was left on the cutting room floor. In order to give the roster a bit more of a boost because it was honestly looking a bit paltry, characters were copied, altered slightly, and given a whole new coat of paint. These were the clone characters, or at least they were, up until the successful gaslighting campaign got us calling them Echo Fighters. See, these are Echo Fighters because everybody hates them. These aren't Echo Fighters because I said so. Marth switched teams to become Roy, they dragged out Pikachu's baby photos for Pichu, Mario took a 3-week online course to become Dr. Mario, it all makes sense. Then came the manner of Ganondorf. He wasn't a character planned to be in the game originally, but was added near the 11th hour since he was pretty popular and because of his resemblance to another character in the game. Oh, so probably like a Bowser or someone, where you can just slap Beast Ganon over him, right? And then the Vroom Vroom Man showed up. Yeah, because Ganondorf and Captain Falcon of all people had similar builds, the decision was made to slap him in his roster fluff as a Captain Falcon clone. This would have long-lasting effects on Ganondorf as a character, but as he was now, it was less a detriment and more really weird. Instead of doing anything reminiscent of Ganondorf's main appearance in Ocarina of Time, or even pulling on Beast Ganon for inspiration, Ganondorf instead has the same moveset as a part-time bounty hunter, part-time race car driver, full-time dead meme. In a series as dedicated as Smash Bros. Is to presenting its characters as faithfully as possible to their source game, this incarnation of Ganondorf is a big sore thumb in how essentially it's a different guy. It isn't a massive deal when it comes to playability, but something about having Ganondorf like this makes him feel so soulless. That soullessness carries over to the announcer.
Mario! Young Link! Ice Climbers! Ganondorf!
He clearly hates this guy. So what about his moveset in this game? Were you not listening? I just told you, Captain Falcon. Almost every single one of Ganondorf's moves is a flat copy and paste of Falcon's. Sure, stuff like his jab, forward tilt, and forward air were modified, and if you're gonna drop any part of Falcon's moveset, the knee would not be high on my list, but other than that, everything else was the same. Even his specials where you could afford to get more creative were carbon copies. The Falcon Punch became the Warlock Punch. Falcon Kick was now Wizard's Foot. Raptor Boost was now Gerudo Dragon. So what fundamental differences were there between Ganondorf and Captain Falcon that you weren't just selecting the same character from a different slot? Well, that comes down to the two things that defined Ganondorf's entire playstyle for the rest of Smash's lifespan. He's super strong and super slow. Ganondorf's movement speed compared to Falcon is absolutely gutted, in some cases decreasing by nearly half of Falcon's speed. Now, comparing most characters to Falcon in terms of speed is pretty unfair, but when that speed puts him as the 4th slowest in terms of walking speed, 6th slowest in terms of dash speed, and 3rd slowest in terms of air speed, it's a massive hit. Compared to Falcon, he has the 4th highest jump speed in the game and fastest dash period. However, for as slow as he moves, he hits just as hard. His strength is incredible. Almost every move he has access to is just a stronger version of what Falcon can do. This makes up for Ganondorf's slow movement speed and how he may not land as many hits, but the ones he does hurt like hell. And while his attack speed on the ground may be, his attack speed in the air is outrageous. Ganondorf's aerial game is deceptively good, with his attacks coming out way faster than they do on the ground, and having a crazy high attack power for aerials. It's in the air that we get to see without a doubt Ganondorf's best and most defining move, the Stomp. Ganondorf's down air is not just the strongest aerial in the game, but it's the one with the ability to meteor smash somebody to the top of the stage, changing the opponent from a deadly warrior into a buckyball in no time flat. It's while in the air that we also get to talk about the more competitive side of Melee. L canceling is a technique where by pressing L within 7 frames of landing, you get to cancel out the animation and be ready to follow up. This is good for most characters in the game, but for Ganondorf, it is absolutely required. Ganondorf has so much ending lag on almost all of his moves that even though they're really strong, they leave him as a sitting duck. The minute amount of time gained by L canceling may be small, but to a Sheik player, that's enough time to do full combo. Whatever Ganondorf can get, he'll take, and as such, he's the character that benefits the most from L canceling. So with all that said, how does Ganondorf fare in the unforgiving world of competitive Melee? Honestly, better than you'd think. Roller coaster emergency brakes don't deliver the sort of whiplash that seeing Ganondorf as the 8th best character in the game gives. And before you say it's because he stole Falcon's skeleton and was using that to scum wins, there were a substantial amount of tier lists where Ganondorf was ranked above Falcon. Why is that? Nobody knew what he was doing. See, this is the benefit of being cursed with the clone character tag. You're similar to your base character, but how similar? Roy is not a note-for-note copy of Marth, Pichu is not a note-for-note copy of Pikachu, and Ganondorf isn't a note-for-note copy of Captain Falcon. They're different in just the right way that people can't exactly rely on previous matchup information to take a win. People going in expecting to fight a slower Captain Falcon were rocked when they figured out that he hit substantially harder and wasn't nearly as slow as people thought when it came to those impressive aerial attacks. Melee Ganondorf is a far cry from the no-hoper we all know and love from Brawl Forward. He had legitimately good combos, good moves, hitboxes, throws. Sure, his recovery might as well have sent him downward for how helpful it was, but imagine having flaws where your character doesn't do everything perfectly. Ganondorf excelled in the early days of Melee, as his success was entirely related to the time of his release. See, the world sucked in 2002. You couldn't figure out which celebrity pissed themselves most recently at a moment's notice, and matchup data was hard to come by. You'd have to turn off all the other electronics in your house just to look up if Ganondorf was even in the game. Everyone had an inkling that characters like Fox, Sheik, Marth, and Captain Falcon were the top dogs, and as such, people would get tons of experience in how to fight them. Conversely, the fact that not as many people played Ganondorf meant that when he did show up, you basically had to learn on the fly what to do against him. Sure, you could translate some Falcon knowledge into the matchup, but what if you were planning for something that was slightly altered in Ganondorf? What if he hit harder? What if his moves had more ending lag? Spoiler, these were both always true, and those differences opened up windows for Ganondorf to get to work. So then why did Ganondorf dip down in the rankings as more lists were released? It's not like we were in any danger of getting a patch. Well, time was moving forward as it does every now and again, and the stories of Ganondorf stealing games he absolutely shouldn't have became more and more well known. Footage of high-level Ganondorf play became more available to more people, and counterplay was developed. Sure, I've been trying to downplay it as much as possible, but Ganondorf's speed issues weren't suddenly non-existent. Comparing his movement to someone like Fox reveals he's woefully outclassed, and in a game like Smash where you constantly need to be on the move to account for your opponent, Ganondorf's speed kneecaps him hard. Even with wave dashing, Ganondorf struggles to make up ground, especially against the entire rest of the roster. In a similar vein, there's just more Ganondorf to hit. He's a fair bit bigger than most of the rest of the cast, and as a result means that it's just easier to land hits on him. Compare Pikachu to Ganondorf and realize that the world is not made for tall people. However, it's not the quality of the character, it's the pilot, and Ganondorf mains are built different, as in they have the blueprints upside down. The two most famous Ganondorf players from Melee were two sides of the same coin, Kage and Bizarro Flame. Kage represented the technical side of Ganondorf. He understood exactly how to wring the most value out of what Ganondorf brought to the table. He was at one time the 34th best player in the world, with only Ganondorf, and took down who at the time was considered the best player in the world, Mango. The celebration is exactly what you would expect for what was a Formula One race car driver losing to a broken down Pinto. Let's put it like this. It was the performance of Kage and fellow Ganon stalwart Linguini that convinced people that he had a winning matchup against Falco. This is a report from friggin' Loodyland. This is Minecraft Steve having a losing matchup against the Sandbag. Bizarro Flame was the dickhead side of Ganondorf. He played in a time where Ganondorf's weaknesses were all well known. He's a slow piece of crap that hits like a boat crash. Despite that, he would consistently rank super high for playing a mid-tier character like Ganondorf, often ranking in the top 100 players in the world. His skill was one thing, but his playstyle and theatrics were what pushed him over the top to become so successful. He would win with Warlock punches, create videos of Ganondorf ice skating to show off his movement options, and even brought the game of disrespecting your opponent to a whole new level.
And when you heard that Eichelman would be taking his spot, what then did you think? Easy money!
He was a shit-stirrer, a habitual line stepper, and frustratingly was good enough to get away with it. Bizarro may have had one of the greatest minds for the metagame of Smash, where even if he wasn't as good or played with somebody who knew all of Ganondorf's counters, are they really gonna be able to focus with the entire crowd on his side? He took tactics from pro wrestling and applied it to Smash Bros. Was he a better Ganon main than Kage? Well, he would have been if he didn't lose to Kage 5 games in a row, but he solidified Ganondorf's reputation. He's an underdog, obviously, but he could also win. He was above a Bowser or a Kirby because there was a real chance he could actually win, while still wearing his low-tier status like a medal. All you need to do is hear a crowd chanting Ganondorf's name to get the vibe the character puts out.
On and see inside each and every one of us.
The warrior. Now question.
But do you hear this chanting one?
Overall, Ganondorf was an extremely viable character early on into Melee's lifespan, having tons of neat tricks and legitimate bombs that could not only steal wins, but convincingly take entire games. As time rolled on, people learned what Ganondorf mains were up to and started to learn how to counter, with the main strategy being, don't be hit by him, something that the faster characters excelled at. Even with this dip by the latter half of Melee's lifespan, Ganondorf is easily at his best in Melee, pretty much at the middle of the pack as Melee's 14th best character. We would never see these lofty heights again.
Suavemente. Bésame. Que quiero sentir tus labios besándome otra vez. Suavemente. Bésame. Que quiero sentir tus labios besándome otra vez. Suave.
Oh god, oh no, it's a disaster! Save for Jigglypuff, which is a whole different can of worms, there have been very few characters to ever take a hit like Ganondorf did in the transition from Melee to Brawl. Most often, characters who are bad stay bad for the rest of their lives. Little Mac is never going to be top tier, and that's fine, but to drop from a middle tier character to undisputed worst in the game is next level embarrassing. So with Brawl having the exact opposite problem from Melee, that being too much development time, you think that they would take Ganondorf, a character included at the last minute as fluff, and rework him, retool him, and refine him into something that represented the character. How about you're lucky he got in at all? While not a late-stage inclusion like before, Ganondorf was still on shaky ground, as his fellow clone classmates like Dr. Mario and Pichu were all culled this time around, a lot of them not coming back until Smash 4 and Ultimate. Ganondorf could stay, sure, but not as the Ganondorf we were hoping for. Instead of changing him up to be more of his own man, Ganondorf stayed the same as he was in Melee for the most part, a heavier, stronger Falcon. But seeing as Falcon himself plummeted all the way to the depths of unplayability in Brawl, his carbon copy wasn't much better off. No bones about it, Ganondorf is the worst character in the game by a comfortable margin. There's a great argument to be made that Brawl Ganondorf is the worst Smash character ever made. First off is the model swap. The shift from Ocarina of Time Ganondorf to Twilight Princess Ganondorf seems innocuous, but you have to take into account that this Ganondorf is a brick house. He's big and he's wide. So the problems that Ganondorf had with absorbing damage due to his size was made even worse. Another fundamental change between Melee and Brawl was the removal removal of L canceling. Along with wave dashing, these features were intentionally left out of the game to close the super wide gap between competitive and casual Smash. While to the average character this stung but was ultimately fine, this took away Ganondorf's one good option. Without L canceling, Ganondorf's air game, the main reason to play the character, was gone, and in its place, oh my god, he's just so slow. Ganondorf is the slowest character in the game overall, right next to Jigglypuff. He can't get anywhere with any amount of quickness, and in the time it takes him to get from one side of the stage to the other, you could finish a full set. In a game where the top tiers are the hoo-ha, the ass boy, and the speed is vitally important, and Ganondorf might as well have been playing with lead weights in his pants. He can't jump high, meaning his bad recovery was even worse, and his combo game suffered. His range was crippled, meaning that he had to work even harder to get in despite not having the speed to accomplish that, but this all had to be leading up to something, right? Like, all this talk about what Ganondorf lost has to be in service of his damage output, right? We all know that Ganondorf hits hard, so all these debuffs must be to make up for how hard he's gonna hit, right? They nerfed his damage. Overall, Ganondorf's main moves do significantly less damage to the point that his power, the reason you'd want to play him now that the aerials were out of the question, is only a little more impressive than average. Look at how they massacred his aerial attacks. His forward air doesn't even do anything anymore. Where all that power went was into some of his worst moves. His up tilt got significantly buffed. Aw, yeah, that move I started charging a week ago. Let's see how it's going. Yep, still charging. He has the strongest forward throw in the game, but his grab is the worst in the game, so he can't ever use it. His horizontal airspeed has been increased, so now he's only the 8th slowest in that regard. I'm getting that put on my birthday cake. You're probably asking, is there any out-and-out positive to Ganondorf's new moveset? Well, there's one. Down air's the best in the game, baby! It's Ganondorf's only good move. It does good damage, it's possible to hit somebody with it, and can lead to a caveman's version of a combo. Along with that, the Gerudo Dragon was swapped out for one of Ganondorf's only unique moves, the Flame Choke. Along with the unanimous agreement that he was the worst character in the game, Flame Choke solidified Ganondorf's meme status in the Smash community. Instead of knocking the opponent up like the dragon did, Flame Choke grabs the opponent and sends them directly down. Whether there's a stage there to stop them is all up to Ganondorf. This move, in a breaking of traditions for Ganondorf, has positives and negatives. It's consistent, meaning you can hit it over and over again in sequence and call it a combo to piss off anybody hit by it. It travels a good distance, does solid damage, sets up other moves like the stomps, but for negatives, it's stupid easy to read. Oh, the giant green man is rocketing while moving towards me with a flaming death hand. Should I A, stand motionless and let him hit me? B, jump off the stage in recognition of his overwhelming power? Or C, move? Who could have thought? Just throwing the move out more often than not will lead to you getting killed. But what if the move more often than not led to you getting killed when you meant it? Ganonside is the great addition to Ganondorf's toolkit from Brawl, and not in terms of competitive viability, usually dying is seen as a suboptimal move in a fight, but for the idea as Ganondorf as the king of garbage. His moves are bad, he's as slow as molasses, he can't hit you, and he absorbs damage like a sponge. So imagine how bad it makes you look to be the guy who lost to him. Ganondorf may be bad, the worst character in the game, but the buttons on your opponent's controller still work, and they do things. So if you treat Ganondorf like a layup, it's entirely likely that you just get destroyed without ever realizing what happened. It only takes a few sloppy moves or missed attacks for Ganondorf to close gaps with frightening speed. Taking on a halfway decent Ganondorf is like fighting a dream. Nothing about it is going to feel like it actually happened, whether that be how easy the fight was, how one-sided your sustained and brutal beating was, or the part where he starts flying. Ganondorf actually benefited from the glitches in Brawl and how his hitboxes made a negative sense. Getting hit with the waft of the wizard kick was as deadly as the kick itself, his up smash seemingly booted your aura in the jaw, or when you perform a hyper-specific input that sends Ganondorf rocketing into the sky to kill you. Make no mistake, none of this was enough to save him in the eyes of players. Ganondorf's major competitive successes in Brawl practically don't exist thanks to the fact that the metagame was faster than light, with Satan himself sitting on top of the throne. Verminubis was the only noteworthy Ganondorf player from the time, and even then, it wasn't any major success. I mean, he beat the world's best Snake player with him, but unlike last time, it wasn't enough to trick people into thinking he was a competitively viable character. Ganondorf as a low tier in Brawl is the worst place he's ever been, because unlike previous Smash games where low tiers were goofy idiots who didn't function, like Game & Watch having a shield that doesn't protect him, Brawl's low tiers aren't funny bad, they're sad bad. Characters like Zelda feeling like every move was designed by a different person, with way too many finishers but no setup, or Jigglypuff being a shell of her former self, Ganondorf's wacky and near useless moveset was different and found an audience that appreciated him for what he was, a bottom-of-the-barrel game scummer. Ganondorf was weirdly both unpredictable and painfully easy to read, underestimated and way overhyped. He is everything, and at the same time, he's nothing. While the story of Ganondorf, the competitively viable character, died in Brawl, what was born was the legend of Ganondorf, low-tier king. The leap from Melee to Brawl was a leap between a smooth summer drive and a 20-car pileup. The leap from Brawl to Smash 4 was a leap from a 20-car pileup to a 20-car pileup, but everybody gets a cool hat. Ganondorf himself didn't change majorly from Brawl to 4, but he did manage to avoid being the worst character in the game this time around, and that's largely down to the game itself changing to suit Ganondorf. Don't let anybody tell you that that lie wasn't a stone-cold fact. Thanks to the fundamental changes in how combos work in Smash 4, Ganondorf had more combo capabilities. He had better defensive options thanks to revisions in how shields and shield stun work, and best of all, the rage mechanic meant that his power went through the roof. See, in Smash 4, everybody is Lucario. A perfect roster, and the longer they stayed in the fight with high damage, the stronger and harder they hit. Now take into account how Ganondorf spends the whole game being beaten up, and you can see how this benefits his already stupidly high stopping power. This ended up being the perfect storm for Ganondorf, as he managed to carve out a niche. It wasn't a good or viable one, but it was a niche. When you combine his improved combos, higher damage output, and Ganon-side tactics from the Brawl days, and then couple that with the fact that competitive Smash went to a 2-stock meta, which nobody liked, Ganondorf now had a plan. Throw as many bombs as possible in the early game to score a quick KO, and then kill both yourself and your opponent. Ganondorf's ability to score an early KO at low percentages meant that he was good at applying pressure and changing the game of Smash from a back and forth to a speed run trying to kill Ganondorf before he killed you. Ganondorf excelled at preying on your weaknesses and slip-ups. You thought you were hot stuff? Better prove it, because the second Ganondorf catches a mistake, he can turn everything around. Again, this strategy stinks and was better done by characters like Kirby, DDD, or Bowser if F tier doesn't sound fun to you. See, at a basic level, I don't think that Ganondorf's playstyle exactly works in a game like Smash. Heavyweights are fine, but when Smash is a platform fighter, and you have a character who can't platform, you have to rely a lot more on that fighter side, and Ganondorf also doesn't impress there. It's the same reason Little Mac has always been low tier. If you look at Smash top tiers from across the games, Pikachu, Fox, Meta Knight, Bayonetta, they all have amazing mobility and the chance to pick when they battle. If it's a good situation for them, they're on you like a cheap suit. If they don't like it, they can keep their distance and choose to fight only when they have the advantage. Look at a character like Snake. If he has the advantage, he can just come in with strong dash attacks, smashes, and aerials. If he doesn't like the situation, he can just stay back and peppers explosives to force the opponent into a situation he's favored in. Ganondorf, meanwhile, is forced to close the gap because just sitting there leaves him vulnerable to projectiles, which he has no counter for. And when he's as bad at closing said gap as he is, it's impossible to not feel like he's playing a different game. Ganondorf's main gap-closing options are the Flame Choke and Wizard's Foot, but those both leave him helpless due to their high ending lag, and in that time the opponent's either gonna reposition or more likely punish your approach. In concept, Ganondorf has a good idea for a playstyle: control the center of the stage and push the opponent out until they're out of options. That's good and reflective of what Ganondorf should play like, a big bully. But if Ganondorf controls just this part of the stage, guess how much that leaves for the opponent? Yeah, that's right, it's all of it! And if Ganondorf tries to tread there, suddenly the bully is the one being knocked around. Not to mention that at any time the other player can just mug Ganondorf and leave him helpless. He needs to be able to close the gap and hit his opponent, but in the state he's in, he can't. All that power without the ability to get in makes it worthless. Hello and welcome to the Goo Goo Corner, where we talk about things that aren't hyper serious and not silly competitive Smash. You'll notice I've left blocks in front of you with letters on them to entertain yourselves, but notice I have arranged them in a way where you cannot spell the word sex. We're gonna be talking about Ganondorf's custom moves, which feel like a million years ago, but were really cool and I'm sad didn't come back. The Warlock Punch can become the Warlock's Blade and Thrust, with a faster windup and shield-breaking sweet spot for the blade, and better vertical range for the thrust. Of the three, Blade is the best one because it has the ability to have Ganondorf deal damage without being up the enemy's nose. Also, the tip can break shields in one hit. The Flame Choke can become the Flame Wave or Flame Chain, with the wave launching the opponent upwards at the cost of having more starting and ending lag, as well as being weaker overall. The chain, however, never grabs and instead dashes through the opponent, which makes for a move great at applying pressure to a shielding opponent, something that Ganondorf has historically struggled with. This may make it the best of the three, but since it can't grab, you can't get inside with it, so it sucks. His Dark Dive is replaced with the Dark Fists and Vault. Dark Fists replaces the grab with 2 upward punches, which leads to fantastic damage while still recovering better than the Dark Dive. Dark Vault stinks! And finally, the Wizard's Foot becomes the Wizard's Assault and Dropkick. Assault is the fastest and pierces through enemies, allowing for mix-ups, but has a very obvious startup and tons of ending lag. Meanwhile, the Dropkick should just be what Ganondorf's regular down B is. It gives him a great tool for closing the gap and approaching the enemy while still dealing good damage, and even helps with recoveries off stage. The fact it wasn't made the default is proof that nobody remembered custom moves existed after the first time you used them. And don't think I didn't notice you tried to use the Z block in place of an S. Yeah, you spelled a X. Good job. And finally, our last stop is in Smash Ultimate. Ganondorf is up to most of his usual tricks, but importantly, there are some big differences. For starter, they replaced his Twilight Princess design with the old Ocarina design. Oh, so Ike gets Twink Ike and Big Boy Ike, but we only get one Ganondorf? Well, how about we take a little something from you, Ike, huh? Ganondorf has received the first piece of a moveset that actually resembles Ganondorf, in several of his smash attacks now involving his massive sword from Ocarina of Time. As I said, a lot of these are filled in from Ike, but it's not hard to argue that Ganondorf does them better. We'll get back to that. He didn't get to take any of his custom moves with him from 4, and in their place instead we got a Ganondorf that looked more like Melee than ever before. His aerials were much faster and were able to be spammed a lot more easily. This gave Ganondorf combos for the first time in about a decade and a half that weren't Flame Choke, rinse and repeat. Then there's the sword. This is a blessing to Ganondorf. It isn't much more than his old smashes, but the range feels like it stretches on forever, and the large sweeping motions meant that he could cover so much more ground and keep his positioning. However, the same old problems rear their ugly head as Ganondorf is still too slow to make the best of these additions. Now, that means not as much in Ultimate as it does in the rest of the games because the cast is a lot more balanced than it used to be, but still, he's not at the top end. Not at the bottom, though! Thanks, Little Mac. Look at it like this. In Smash, you're either winning or you're losing. There is no middle ground. Good characters have plans both if they're the one applying pressure or having pressure applied to them. Ganondorf characters are great if you're beating the opponent senseless, but less good when you're on the receiving end. He can push advantage when he's in control, but he just doesn't have a way to take it back. If you're being rolled by Ganondorf, there's no stopping him. If Ganondorf is being rolled, there's no stopping it. That's reflected in Ganondorf's offstage game. If he's offstage because he wants to be, it's to deliver a massive stomp or similar spike to take someone out way sooner than they should have been taken out. If he's off stage because he's forced to be, he's already dead because there's nothing in him to get back on the stage. And that's kind of built into the character of Ganondorf from his very bone marrow, that he's meant to be winning at all times, to the point that he doesn't have any tools to help him get there. It's like he's just supposed to start in this state of immediate dominance that he just can't reach. Now, all this can sound like it's too focused on Ganondorf as a competitive character, and that's mainly because I can't exactly speak to everybody's individual experiences with the character. Somebody listening to this probably has a friend who terrorizes them with Warlock punches. Ganondorf at his best was a mid-tier character that could keep up with the bottom end of top tier. Ganondorf at his worst was laughed out of F tier, but weirdly, it was at his lowest low that the Ganondorf community was at their strongest. He can be a terrifying Iron Wall or the goofiest scrub lord in the world, and people love him for that. There's one thing you can never call a Ganondorf match, and that's boring. A Ganondorf match is going to be a fast, one-sided death match, and seeing who's the one about to die is half the enjoyment. He's the epitome of a for-fun character with the most ride-or-die fandom of the whole roster. Ganondorf is a fan favorite, a crowd pleaser. When somebody busts out Ganondorf, you know you're in for a special match. Is this guy being serious? Does he know how to play Ganondorf, or is he just picking Ganondorf because it's Ganondorf? Does he secretly hate his opponent and this is how he's choosing to display it? And sometimes that's exactly what you want from an opponent, somebody who isn't gonna take the game too seriously. If you're in the mood to fight a sweaty tryhard, you're not hard up for finding people like that. But if you want to find somebody who's just there to have a good time, Ganondorf's your man. Ganondorf will never be a competitive character. Heck, I think it's fair to say he'll never even be a good character, but he's just so much fun, not even in the sense of a fun video game. Oftentimes, you're not gonna have a lot of fun being beaten pillar to post. Ganondorf is a fun experience for everybody to go through. You're not gonna get spammed or infinitely comboed by Ganondorf. He's physically incapable of doing that. The worst you're gonna get is a flame choke off stage, but at that point, Ganondorf just died too, so how can you not have fun? His best strategy is to kill himself. That's what you're gonna get upset over? What I'm saying not only applies to Ganondorf, but all low-tier characters. They're bad, but they're all the better for it. They can't win, but that doesn't mean you're gonna stop trying. They can't do what the rest of the cast does, but so what? We'll just do what we do better than everybody else. Low-tier characters are vital for a fighting game, as sometimes you don't want a skill-intensive matchup or to build a new stage midway through a match. Sometimes you just want to calmly walk up, hold forward an A, and